What's up, everybody? Derek Anderson, the DA, and this is my review of Thor, Love and Thunder, the newest MCU film, number 29, I believe, in the overall MCU. Directed by Taika Waititi. It stars Chris Hemsworth, Natalie Portman, Christian Bale, Tessa Thompson, and Russell Crowe. All right, what did I think about this movie? Simply put, it's the worst things about the MCU times like 1,000. Like, it's just super messy, and it's confusing, and it's boring, and it's excessive. Like, this thing praises itself in its own excess. It's like a pig wallowing in its own slop, and that's the bad part, because if it was wallowing in all the good stuff about the MCU, I would be like, okay, cool, give me more. But it's wallowing in the bad things about the MCU, you know, like off-putting every serious moment with a joke. Oh, it does that to like 1 million, and it really goes on top, you know, like Taika Waititi's style times 1,000. If you love Taika Waititi, then you'll probably love this film. You'll probably be like, hey, why is everybody hating this film? But if you think like Taika Waititi's an alright director, just every once in a while he goes a little bit overboard, yeah, this is him going to the absolute extreme with everything that he does. So a quick synopsis of this film. You got Christian Bale, right? Starts off with Christian Bale playing Gorr the God Butcher. And right off the bat, we get like a really nice, good, serious scene that I'm like, okay, this was a great place to build. You know, his daughter dies. He goes to his gods forsake him. He basically swears revenge, and now he becomes Gorr the God Butcher. He has a sword, and he's out looking to kill gods. In the meantime, Thor is trying to find himself. He's off on adventures with the Guardians of the Galaxy. None of that stuff is funny, by the way. It's just goofy, dumb, and it's not interesting. It's not important to the story whatsoever. But you know, they kind of try to play it for laughs. Nobody in the theater was laughing at any of that stuff. But then you get to Jane Foster, who is now riddled with cancer. I'm sure folks have learned that she's dying, and Jane goes to New Asgard because she hears Mjolnir kind of reaching out to her. So she gets to New Asgard and becomes the mighty Thor when the hammer kind of reforms itself. Gorr is looking for gods to kill, and I guess Thor is next on his little hit list. So he goes to New Asgard looking for Thor. Thor arrives along with Jane Foster's Thor and Valkyrie, and they basically end up getting into battle with Gorr. Gorr then kidnaps all of the children and takes them off to a unknown location, and now they got to find them. And then basically that's it. That's the story. And with that being said, like, there's a story in there, don't get me wrong, like there's a little story that you could be telling in that situation, and unfortunately with Taika Waititi's style, his style is the problem in this situation. His storytelling style, it just kind of overwhelms everything that you could do in this film, all the good stuff. Even there's a couple of scenes where it's like, hey man, this is a good serious moment, and then all of a sudden it's just punctuated by nonsense and jokes, and it's just like, all right, I don't care now, you know. And what happens when you tell a story like that, where it's just constantly not taking itself seriously? You don't take this film seriously either. You just kind of sit back and like, okay, I guess this is a comedy. But like, even like movies like The Mystery Men took itself a little bit more serious than this. I mean, this isn't fun for anybody, in my opinion, because you have some like really heavy topics in this thing. You have a revenge story, you have a story of lost love, you got a kidnapping story, death and its cold, cruel sting, you know, you got all of that going on, search and rescue. You know, there's a lot of stuff going on that could really make for a very interesting story, but nothing is treated like with even a little bit of like a modicum of seriousness, of gravity, of, you know, urgency. Like everything is just like, you know, yeah, let's just crack jokes about all of this stuff, folks. That's what people do in these situations, right? They just crack a bunch of jokes. And I think like Waititi could really learn from the Russos, because the Russos did a little bit of joke telling, no question, in their films. You know, they allowed the serious moments to be serious for a minute, you know, just, hey, let this sit with the people for a minute. You know, the audience is like, oh wow, and let that sit with them, and then go to the next scene, and now that's still on their minds, and now their emotions are getting moved in a different way. You can't just make people laugh all the time if you're trying to tell, in my opinion, a good comic book story. Now, if you want to tell The Mystery Men, yeah, jokes galore, have at it, and put nothing but comedians in it, by the way, because they'll have all the proper comedic timing to pull that stuff off, because unfortunately, Jane Foster is not funny, and so when jokes are coming out of her mouth, or funny things are supposed to be coming out of her mouth, it just doesn't work, you know. know, I don't know if Natalie Portman needs to go back to like comedy school to learn how to be funny, but none of that stuff was working. So you have like this odd mix of, you know, actors who really are trying to do comedy. And let me say, Chris Hemsworth on the flip side has absolutely perfect comedy timing. We saw that even in that garbage Ghostbusters movie. Like, he can be funny, and it works, and he knows how to pull this stuff off. The other actors, Tessa Thompson, Natalie Portman, they just aren't funny. So the stuff that they're saying that's supposed to be funny, it doesn't come off funny, it's not funny, and so that just further ruins the film. You know, like, they're throwing out like these like really overly simplistic jokes that really weren't working in the audience, like that I was sitting with. You could tell they wanted to laugh. People were just kind of giggling at even the dumbest thing because they were trying to, like, okay, I'm trying to enjoy this and I'm trying to have some fun here, but man, nothing really is that funny. So I'm just like sitting on tender hooks, like, come on, can I say something funny? And nothing happened, you know? So now it's like the entire premise of this guy undercutting everything with a joke. It just becomes a joke in and of itself. The movie was sad and boring, and yeah, unfortunately, I just did not enjoy it as much as I should have. But let's go ahead and get to the scoreboard, and I'll get into further detail. All right, folks, so here we go with the scoreboard of Thor: Love and Thunder. Let's go ahead and check it out. Number one, of course, is direction. So Taika Waititi, in my opinion, this was just a strange choice for tone and for gravity for a film like this. There's too much comedy. It was totally out of place in a film like this. And like, when nothing is being taken seriously, like when you just have so many jokes, everything is serious but nothing is being taken seriously, you know, you just kind of lose your audience at that point. I mean, that's what happened in this film. It's overstuffed with bad comedy and no one laughed. Like, the entire audience was just sitting there with their hands in their laps, just kind of like and stuff like that. You know, it's kind of like a comedian. You ever see a comedian who act is just failing miserably? His act just isn't hitting, and you know, he's still up on stage telling jokes, but there's no way to get the little cane and cane this thing out of there. Yeah, unfortunately. And I also, like, this was the most I've ever seen people leave, like, right after the movie was over. Like, about, I would say maybe 10-12 people got up and left, and I'm like, okay, the Marvel Cinematic Universe has post-credit scenes, but I think people had just had enough. They were just like done, and I was actually embarrassed for this guy, Taika Waititi. He just has to think about, if he's making any more Marvel films, think about what he's doing with these characters and what tone he should have for his film. But nevertheless, direction, I'm going to go ahead and give that a 5. So next up is the other culprit of this, the script and the story. And yeah, here's the thing about this. Like I said earlier, the story is actually fine. Like, the story is passable, but it's the storytelling, right? The actual script. You know, you can have a story and you can have like a, you know, old grandfather, you know, that kind of knows how to tell a story, and he's like good with the voices, and he's just kind of weaving in all of this, you know, and you're just sitting there mystified, like, wow, grandpa, tell me another story. You know, like, there's that kind of storyteller. And then you can have somebody telling the exact same story, like Ben Stein. Yes, this is what happened. And that's the problem here. It's not that he's telling the story too boring. He's just going way too over the top with his style, and his style really interferes with really what could have been a pretty decent story for Thor, and for even, you know, Jane Foster over there. It could have been an interesting story. I think one big thing they were missing out of this was Loki. Loki was really kind of the centerpiece of the humor of the first 3 films. In a lot of ways, the first 2 films, and then in the third film, you know, he was kind of used much more like a punching bag, but also still able to give you some good moments. And no Loki in this, so unfortunately other people had to pick up the slack. And like I said, Jane Foster and Valkyrie, not funny whatsoever. What this film really needed was like a script writer, like, that could really spin a yarn, like, you know, like like I always used to say, like, you need an old hand at the pen, right? You need an old hand, somebody that's like got some knowledge about how to tell stories and knows how to balance the funny stuff with the serious stuff and just let it all play out, like a, you know, Robert Towne or Lawrence Kasdan or William Goldman, like those old school screenwriters back in the day. Like, those guys knew how to tell a story. This thing is just too flippant. You know, it's just too flippant and too full of itself. And yeah, that's the problem when you have a successful movie director that's just feeling himself like Taika Waititi is apparently in this particular situation. I don't have anything against the guy personally, but you can tell he's just kind of feeling himself right now, and he just wrote this, and I mean, this is just like utter excessive garbage. Nevertheless, script and story, I'm gonna go ahead and give that a 5 as well. All right, next up, acting. So the acting was actually not as big a problem, with the exception of Natalie Portman, like I said, and Tessa Thompson dropping jokes. Go to some comedy school, learn how to tell jokes, or learn how to be funny. I don't think they were funny in this whatsoever. Chris Hemsworth does his work, okay? I think he's good. I think Christian Bale is good. A little bit that he's on the screen. Russell Crowe had a couple of funny little moments. He's just there for comedy relief, and I thought that he was all right. But yeah, the other two, and again, it's nothing against them as actresses, because I've seen Natalie Portman in a lot of stuff, and she is good when she can be good. She is great. She's on her game. But just unfortunately, what they were doing with her character, they were trying to replace the two of them with Loki and say, okay, Loki, you know, used to be our funny guy. Now we need you guys to kind of pick up some of the humor, and it just didn't work, you know. And when Thor is trying to play off Loki, it's fantastic. When Thor is trying to play off of these two, they all have their moments in this film. I think that Hemsworth and Bale really held it together for the most part, you know, especially Christian Bale is a consummate professional, and he did his damnedest to really drag this thing across the finish line. You believe his character, you have sympathy for his character, you know, in certain regards. So I thought that Christian Bale did a great job. I thought that Hemsworth was solid as usual as his character. Everybody else was just kind of on the screen. You know, Portman had a couple of moments, you know, especially when she's talking about the cancer in the situation, kind of mid movie. That was really a touching moment. But then, yeah, here come the jokes. Hey, everybody, his joke, and then this totally ruined it. Nevertheless, I thought acting was all right. I'm gonna go ahead and give that a 7. And then finally, what was my biggest surprise, okay, was the sights and the sounds. So here's why I was surprised. There is so much green screen, noticeable green screen. Like, how did this get past the editor? This looks bad, right? Really bad. Like, you guys can tell I'm behind a green screen, right? It was like as bad as my green screen is, and this is Hollywood quality. If you guys can't get better than what I'm doing here at home, you got a big issue. But yeah, there are so many noticeable green screens, and again, just the excess of colors, the music soundtrack, Guns N' Roses all over the place, which is, you know, cool, nothing wrong with that. But just overall, just kind of the sounds were fine, the sights were just a big disappointment. And again, it's just about that excess. We're gonna go super colorful this time, and just kind of almost nauseate you with how much we're just throwing colors into this thing. And yeah, just was a huge disappointment. Normally, sights and sounds for these films, I'm saying like a solid 8 would be just the norm. And yeah, this one actually fell below that. I went ahead and gave it a 7. All right, finally, we get to the final total score. And yeah, if you add the numbers up and you do the math, it comes up to a 6.0. This is probably like one of the bottom 4 for my personal MCU list, easily. You know, Iron Man 2, Thor: The Dark World, and then this one. I don't know what the 4th one would be. I would have to look. But yeah, this one is right in line with those other films. So, folks, what did you think about this film, Thor: Love and Thunder? I know you got to see it because everybody's probably going to go and watch it this weekend. And go ahead and give me your thoughts. Leave them in the comments below. All right, let's go ahead and check out the main board. Let's see where this stacks up. Film number 25. All right, folks, so here we go, the 2022 movie ratings, and you can see Thor: Love and Thunder coming in all the way down at number 19. Yeah, just really disappointing film. And I hope, like, you know, that Marvel is starting to learn, okay, you know, they're getting some bad reviews on this film. The Phase 4 of the MCU has been an absolute sloppy mishmash of nonsense, some good stuff, some bad stuff. I'm hoping that they're trying to kind of find their way through this, so by the time they do get to Phase 5, they can start fixing some things and start getting it back on track. But nevertheless, folks, here's my movie rating. Still the top 5 remain: Top Gun Maverick at 1, X at number 2, The Batman at number 3, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness at number 4, and Jujutsu Kaisen 0 at number 5. What does your list look like? Go ahead and let me know in the comments, folks. And yeah, thanks for watching. See you next time.